with us tonight, and most of our brothers are headed to Baton Rouge, our frat brothers of Baton Rouge for Alpha Day at the Capitol, in which I will be joining them right after this meeting, headed to Baton Rouge to spend time with them at the Capitol and then lead prayer for the House of Representatives tomorrow. And we're certainly excited about that, serving as honorary chaplain of the day. What a huge honor it is, and I thank God for State Representative Barbara Norton for her invitation, and then to say hello to our Senate. And I'm grateful for Senator John Mikovich's invitation to say hello tomorrow to our Louisiana senators, and what a high honor it is. Well, at this time, we'll receive Overseer Brandon Keith Lacey of New Life House of Worship. He'll open with prayer, and then, of course, we'll receive our awesome illustrious moderator, and she, of course, serves the I Am My Faith radio broadcast. She's a radio personality and double master's degree, and we're just so proud of her. And, of course, she's a parent, and we're so proud of her sharing with us tonight. Let's receive Overseer Lacey.
Thank you, Bishop. Let us look to the Lord in prayer. Father, our God, we thank you, we love you, we give you glory, honor, and praise, for you are good, and your mercy endures forever. From the rising of the sun to the going down of the same, your name is worthy to be praised. Father, on this day, we ask your blessings upon this call to action, this call to response. And we thank you for the hearts of the people who have gathered here tonight, that have made themselves available to be servants in this particular cause. Father, we pray that the information that comes forth will be helpful to the uplifting and the upbuilding of your kingdom here in Shreveport, Louisiana. We pray that your grace and mercy would abide with us throughout this meeting, that you would give clarity, wisdom, and understanding. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen, and thank God. Amen. Let's receive Mr. Williams.
Well, greetings again. I am Katina Williams, and prayerfully tonight will be a night that will be highly informative for each of you. So we want you to make sure that you listen closely and are attentive, because we have some great information coming for you. At this time, we're going to have the representative from State Representative Barbara Norton's office to come and address us. Okay, we're moving forward. Mr. Clay Walker, if you would come before, please.
Thank you and good evening. I wanted to start by saying, to talk about the forum tonight, I'm the administrator at Juvenile Court. We have a 24-bed detention center, and we have a probation staff, generally about 350 children, unfortunately, on probation at any given time. And so what we're talking about, part of the panel tonight, but the work that we're doing, is as a community, how can we prevent kids from ever coming to see me? How can we do better with the school system, more in the school system, more in the community, get kids into positive programs and try to keep them out of trouble, off the streets a little bit, and certainly never coming to detention. The problem that we have, and I think the reason for the forum is that in March of this year, on March 1st, 17-year-olds transitioned from the adult system down to the juvenile. So for the history of court in Louisiana, if you were 17, you get arrested, you go to CDC, and you get tried as an adult. Starting on March 1st of this year, it's in two phases. The first phase is nonviolent offenders. So nonviolent 17-year-olds on March 1st started coming to juvenile. And we think that's appropriate because, frankly, 17-year-old children, 17-year-olds generally still in school. They can't vote. They can't sign contracts. So we generally think that it's appropriate for them to be treated as children. Problem is that you're talking about roughly 250, 300 17-year-olds that will be coming to juvenile court. And unfortunately, it's coming without any money from the state. So we're not adding any detention beds, and we're not adding any probation staff. And when I said it was two phases, the second phase, when it really starts, is July of 2020. On July 1st of 2020, all 17 including those with violent charges, will now be coming to juvenile court. And again, we think that's appropriate in terms of how they'll get treatment and what we can do to help them get back on the right track. But we are talking about the idea that they'll be coming to juvenile court without any additional revenue for juvenile court. And so I think part of what we're going to be dealing with tonight, we have three judges in juvenile court in Caddo Parish: Judge David Matlock, Judge Paul Young, who's here, and Judge Ree Casey Jones, who's here. These are our two judges for Caddo deal with delinquency. So children charged with a crime will be going before one of these two judges. And then we have with us Commissioner Stormy Gage Watts, who is not only the president of the commission this year, but she is now in her second year as the head of the Juvenile Justice Subcommittee. So she has been working with the juvenile court to deal with not only this issue of the 17-year-olds, but a lot of the prevention as well, to try to get more programs for youth so that we can try to get kids back on the right track and prevent crime, prevent them from ever coming. But that's the issue we're here for tonight, is that 17-year-olds have transitioned. We're talking about roughly 300 youth that will be coming to juvenile court, and how we're going to deal with that influx without any more revenue, without any more resources. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Clay Walker. Without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and begin the forum for tonight. As we begin, what I would like to do is I would like for each of the panelists to begin by introducing themselves and also by sharing your philosophy on juvenile detention. So if we can begin with Judge Ree Casey Jones.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good evening. I am Ree Casey Jones, one of the judges at juvenile court, and I am primarily responsible for delinquency matters, which are criminal matters for juveniles. Also, I preside over adoptions for all the children in Caddo Parish. We have a family preservation court, which is our adult drug court, and I am the presiding judge over that court, as well as a STAR court, which is our human trafficking court, which we just initiated in March of 2019. What else do I do? Several things. It's only three of us there, so Judge Young and I have a lot of responsibility. I also handle family and native services, as well as some child and native care cases. And so basically, this is my second year, going into my third year on the bench. I was elected in 2016, and we're busy. It's every day, it's something going on. It's an experience every day. We're seeing more and more activity with our youth each day. And unfortunately, a lot of it is negative. And so our job is to try to deter our children from a life of crime, especially for them not to get to the adult system. Okay? My mission has always been to judge with compassion for our children and our families. Okay, juvenile court is not just a court for children; it's a court for families, and we're all about keeping our families together as much as we possibly can, and also making sure that programs are in place to ensure that parents know how to be parents and children are actively being productive citizens in society. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Paul Young.
I'm Judge Paul Young. As Judge Ree Casey Jones said, I'm one of the two judges that handle primarily the delinquency matters. I'm also the judge for the truancy court, for the juvenile drug court, and the juvenile mental health court. We mention, just as an aside, these other courts, and that is a very important point. In our parish, we have the best juvenile justice system in the state, largely because of our efforts to develop these specialized courts, which have the result of decreasing recidivism and improving the outcomes for children. The vast majority of children that come before us don't come back. The vast majority. There are a sizable number that come back once or twice, and then there's a core of offenders that give us a lot of trouble. But these specialized courts are designed to deal with some of those more entrenched issues. For example, our mental health court for juveniles, the first one established in the state and one of only a handful in the whole country, reduced the commitment rate for children with serious mental illness that happen to have committed a delinquent act. The commitment rate nationwide when we started this court was 66% would go off to placement out of the home in some institution, juvenile prison, group homes, or mental health facilities. We have reduced that commitment rate to around 10 to 15%. We do prevention. Our drug court has less stellar statistics because drug use, as you can well imagine, is a more entrenched problem that is more difficult to deal with. But that's the type of thing we have traditionally done at juvenile court in Caddo Parish. The Caddo Parish Commission funds those programs, and without that, of course, we couldn't do it. So we do a lot of efforts to turn kids around. In our detention center, however, we run at a near capacity rate. We have the smallest detention center in the South. Mobile, Little Rock, Jackson, all those sister cities you think of as Shreveport have twice the size of the detention center that we do. And we've been able to limp along with that because of these programs that we've been talking about, these specialized courts and our intensive supervision and our probation department and electronic monitors, things like that. But with the addition of 17-year-olds, you can well imagine with 250 to 300 more kids per year, average of 10, 15, 20 a month, those numbers don't add up, do they? We're going to have an extra, say, 10 to 15 kids in detention that's already running at near capacity of 24 beds. So that's why I've been talking for a couple of years now about the crisis coming, and that is here. My philosophy on detention is simply, it is a tool among all those other tools that we've talked about to try to rehabilitate children. But sometimes when you have kids that are on probation, that are running amok at school, violating curfew because parents aren't supervising them, perhaps, reoffending, then you can't just leave them on probation, can you? You've got to do something else. And detention is one of those tools to make them focus on the things they need to be focusing on. School, compliance with their parents, compliance with treatment, attending drug court, for example. If they don't show up to drug court, what do? Well, we have community service that we do, but if they don't show up for that, then I put them in detention to make them focus on what they're supposed to be focusing on. So that's my philosophy for detention, is to make them focus on the treatment programs that we have to make them be compliant when they've shown a tendency not to be compliant with that.
Thank you, Judge Young. Now, Commissioner Stormy Gage Watts.
Good evening, everyone. As you've already heard, I serve as the commission of the Caddo Parish Commission as the president. I am in my second year, as you already have heard, as well as the Juvenile Justice Detention Center, actually it's a subcommittee. I serve as the chair of that committee as well. My philosophy, actually, it's the judge's decision on who walks out and in that juvenile detention center. However, I do have my own personal thoughts. Outside of being their budgeter, I am responsible for the budget. I'm responsible to make sure that they have the resources available, as you've already heard, to make sure that they can exercise those needs of those wraparound services that are being provided, that are working, I must say, as preventative or alternative measures to keep our youth from incarceration. Ultimately, that is my goal, is to prevent that. However, I know that there are crimes that will be committed and that those children will have to be held accountable for those things. I do agree that we will not be able to do anything to eradicate it. In other words, we'll always have crime. However, I believe if we continue to work together, as we have in the past, that we can continue to work towards solutions so that we will not have to expand the current size of the greatest facility, as you've already heard, that is operating in Louisiana, because I believe that the judges as well as the staff has done a very good job in making sure that we have the lowest recidivism rate right here in Louisiana.
Well, thank you. There's been a lot of talk. One of the hot button issues as of late is, of course, as we mentioned, the potential building of a juvenile facility or additional pods. Can you give the audience the current status of where we are in that situation? I'll start with you, Mr. Young.
All right. Well, as I said, I've been talking about this for 2 years, ever since the raise the age to 17 for juvenile jurisdiction law was passed, on Keel and in the newspaper and community groups around the city. And frankly, we're no closer to expanding the detention center than we were when I started. And that's very disappointing. I think we have, over the last 2 years, proven conclusively that the numbers just don't make sense. We cannot, and I'm not sure why Caddo Parish should suffer under the banner of having the smallest detention center in the South. I don't understand that. When we don't have the smallest crime rate in the South, and we don't have the smallest population among the cities in the South. We're about mid-range on those two things. But we have the smallest detention center in the South. And like I said, we've been able to limp along with that because of all the good programs that we have. But adding 10 to 15 kids, statistically, each month, 17-year-olds, they don't fit in a 24-bed facility that's already running at around 20 kids on average. You just don't have the room. So the judges would have to be letting people go, frankly. And I don't think that's what the citizens want, frankly. The problem with the 17-year-olds, they're not like 10 or 11-year-olds. If we had to expand the age down to 8, from 10, right now it's 10 is the youngest that can be charged criminally. If you expanded it down to 8, that wouldn't make any difference in detention, because the idea of having kids that young in detention is very rare. We usually do not have 10, 11, even 12-year-olds in detention because they're still subject to the control of their parents in almost all cases. And they don't have the risk of running off to Texas or California to avoid prosecution, okay, or to, skip out otherwise, to failure to appear. But 17-year-olds have that ability. They can get in a car and pretend to be adults and nobody know the difference, and they can drive all the way to California if they want to avoid a burglary prosecution in juvenile court. And the 17-year-old is more likely to have a record than a younger child. And so they know, already having an adjudication, a record, that if they get convicted of another offense, say a subsequent burglary, that they're very likely facing a placement in a group home or juvenile prison. Well, they tend not to show up for that if left to their own devices. So we have to increasingly put 17-year-olds, 16 and 17-year-olds in detention to make sure they're there for trial because of that likelihood of not showing up. So it's a problem not just expanding the age, but the type of child, by definition, that's going to be charged with that offense. He's going to have a record. He's more likely not to show up, and he or she is more likely to be able to not show up because of their age, their maturity, their ability to hit the streets and not show up for trial. And we see that with 16-year-olds, and we're seeing that now with 17-year-olds, even as we're getting them in now. So that's the problem, and we're frankly not any closer to a solution than when we started 2 years ago.
Judge Casey, did you want to follow up on that question?
Give me the question one more time.
Sure. What is the current status of the proposal to add pods or to even increase or build a juvenile facility?
I agree with Judge Young, where he's been talking about this for a couple of years now, and we're still in the same position as we were at at that time that nothing is actually being built. Um, it's still being discussed and decided. We have tried to find alternative means of detention. Okay, we've tried to look into group homes. We've tried to look into more monitors being placed on the children's ankles. Okay, we tried quite a few things. Basically, to try to prevent number one, the children being in detention, and then number two, the overcrowdedness, because it does become an issue. There are many a times Judge Young and I have duty every other week. He's on duty one week, I'm on duty the other week. And so we'll get calls all day long as far as children being in the detention center, and Judge, we're at 20. Okay, now Judge, an hour later, we're at 22. Judge, we're at 26, and we only have 24 beds. So we have to make a decision as far as who's to stay in detention and who's to leave. If you all have been watching the news lately, there has been an increase in murders of young people, children under the age of 18, okay? There's been an increase in rapes. There's just been an increase in violent crimes with children under the age of 17. And although I am for rehabilitating a child and putting everything in place to try to deter the child from detention, I am a strong believer that violent crimes need to be in detention, okay? I am not going to allow a child accused of murder to be back out on the streets because I don't have room in a detention center. I am not going to allow a child who has committed rape or accused of committing rape on another child to be put back on the streets because I don't have room in a detention center. That's a decision that we should not have to make as judges. I guarantee you the judges at First JDC, the district court downtown, are not having to decide who goes to CCC and who leaves because Sheriff Prater has a problem with bed space, okay? And it's not about if you build it, they will come. They're already a part of the system, okay? Right now, we have nonviolent offenders who are 17 years old as of March 1st. July 2020, all children 17 years old, whether violent or nonviolent offenders, will come to our detention center. As Judge Young stated, we typically don't put 10, 11, and 12-year-olds in detention unless it's something very, very serious, and we've been very fortunate not to have those problems so far or lately. However, when you have a 13-year-old who has been adjudicated of murder, and then I also have a 17-year-old in there, there's going to be some issues there because there's an age difference, there's a mentality difference. And so you're mixing those groups together. That's a problem. You don't have the space. It's confined. And so that's why maybe 24 beds or 30 beds or 50 beds is not more beds, is not going to answer or solve some issues that we have. However, something needs to be done because we don't want to get to a place where we are at capacity with children who have committed violent acts and we have nowhere for them to go. I can't put them in a group home. I can't put them with children who are ungovernable, who just run away from home, who want to talk back to their mom and dads, who don't want to go to school. I can't put them with kids who have just stolen some candy out of Walmart or some clothes out of Walmart, okay? I can't mix a person accused of murder with a person accused of just, I don't want to be at home. I want to be grown. I can't do it. Imagine what will happen. Imagine the recruitment that would go on in the detention center with such a small space. You just have to think about all of that. So we have a lot to think about, but these decisions are something that definitely don't need to be made by judges as far as who has to stay and who has to leave just because we don't have the space.
I might add, and I'm sure Judge Casey Jones would agree, that we already, every child that we think can safely be released to something less restricted, like on electronic monitor or to a supervised setting, we already release those kids. We don't have a shortage of electronic monitors. We don't have a shortage of intensive supervision of probation officers. We have a shortage of bed space in detention for kids that must be in detention.
Okay. Commissioner Stormy Watts, I'm going to direct this question to you. Being that you preside over the budget as relates to the juvenile detention center, we know that if there is an opportunity as the 17-year-olds come to the detention center, and those that are more violent, that have committed violent crimes, come in 2020.
Right.
What is the projected cost of that, and where will those monies come from?
Well, first, KT, first I want to address some things that were said.
Sure.
Before I answer that. First of all, I think that one thing that has not been mentioned, we are talking about an unfunded mandate that was passed down to us. Caddo Parish is not the only parish that is being challenged about the Raise the Age Act for the 17-year-olds. Also, when mentioning the violent crimes, the violent offenders, those offenders are still being housed at CCC right now. So that's something that we're looking towards in the future. To answer your question, the proposals that we've received have been about 2 years ago, and there are several options out there. The maximum cost was $12 million. However, we run the Juvenile Detention Center each year in a deficit of $3.5 million. So if we were to double the capacity of Juvenile Detention Center right now, we're also doubling the deficit. So how many years could we operate a facility in a deficit? That's just not fiscally responsible. And the citizens sent us there as commissioners to be responsible with those dollars. However, we also do not feel that the judges should have to make those type of decisions on who gets to go and who gets to stay if they have committed those type of crimes. And I was hoping that it will be a representative here from the state so that we could hear what are they proposing on the state level to help us with these challenges. Because I believe that crisis does present an opportunity, and I call it a challenge and not a crisis. I think that is something that we will be able to work through if all three entities would work together. But this is something that has been passed to us, as I said. It's no reason to just pass the buck from one person to the next. On a budgetary constraint, that's something that will have to be made a decision amongst all commissioners. It would take at least 8 votes to say, let's send it back to the citizens. Allow you all to vote on it. And knowing that the millages would increase your taxes over time, but we're running off of a 1957 millage. One of the first questions that I asked as a commissioner when I saw that budget is, why are we working with this budget? You know, 1957 millage, why has it never been rolled forward? It had always been rolled back. So how do you come up to 2019 to compare how that facility was being ran? There's no other way but coming back to the taxpayers and asking for an increase.
If you don't mind, we pause for a station identification. My wife is coming. I really don't want to get in trouble. I'm going to ask her to come and she'll share on our programs real quickly. And then there are those of you that have questions. Thank you so much at YouTube Live, praisetemple.com. Thank you so much. Go ahead and list your questions, and we'll certainly get them to the moderator. We're so grateful that you're watching us literally from around the world. Thank you. We are in Shreveport, Louisiana. Thank you so much. Co-Pastor Wanda Brandon.
Thank you, Bishop. This summer, June the 10th through the 28th, we have a summer technology camp for children 5 to 17 years old. You may have gotten a brochure as you came in. We'll be teaching robotics, coding, music and video production, and this year we're introducing drones to our program. So it's June the 10th through the 28th, free lunch, free breakfast, and the camp is absolutely free, and it's in our technology center next door.
Excellent job.
Thank you so much. Mr. Clay Walker, if you would like to join the panelists, there's certainly a seat for you, sir. I'm sure we could use your input as well. And for those of you that are just tuning in, of course, we are in our Juvenile Justice Forum tonight here at Praise Temple. Our panelists are, of course, Judge Ree Casey Jones. We have also with us Judge Paul Young. We have Commissioner Stormy Watts, and we also have Mr. Clay Walker, who is the Executive Director? Director of Juvenile Services with us tonight. So we're so thankful and so grateful for their time on tonight. And we're going to continue with our questions. I'm going to direct this question to Judge Ree Casey Jones. If the support is not there, if we get to the point to where we bring it to the people and the support is not there for another facility or additional pods, what will be the next step?
To continue to do what we're doing, and praying that it is a success. That's the thing. Continue to put in programming, to continue to do GPS monitoring, to only keep the children who are a definite threat to the citizens and compromise the safety of our citizens in Caddo Parish and elsewhere. But we hope that we can get the message out. And I agree with Commissioner Watts as well, Gage Watts as well, as far as this is a 1957 millage that we're working with. Some of us were not even born at that time. Yes, weren't even thought of. So that's an issue. That's an issue. And she is correct. This is an unfunded mandate. Other cities, other parishes, however, have built new detention centers. And because their citizens are informed and they understand the seriousness, I'm not saying that our people don't understand the seriousness of what's going on in Caddo Parish, but I believe that the other citizens are more informed of what is going on in the area. They understand it's just not about giving up more money. It's about your safety. And we have to sometimes spend a little bit more money to make sure that our children are safe, to make sure that we're safe, and just to make sure that our government is properly functioning. And so this is something that none of us have asked for. This is something that the court as well as the commission is working hard on daily, trying to find a resolution to this problem. But it is my hope, my prayer, that the citizens hear our call, and once this is decided upon to bring this to a vote to the citizens of Caddo Parish, they do what is best for Caddo Parish.
Mr. Clay Walker, since we asked you to come, this next question is directed to you. What advice can you give to help parents with their children during the summer months? I know kids are out, and sometimes parents are working, and they may get into things. So what advice would you give parents?
This may seem relatively simple, but I think the bottom line is keep them busy. Keep them busy, wear them out, get them to bed, good and worn out and tired. Idle hands is what causes trouble. If you got kids sitting around the neighborhood with not much to do, unfortunately, sometimes they'll get into some mischief and get into some trouble. But I think a lot of the programs look into the SPAR facilities, look into running and track programs, look into sports programs, get them with coaches, get them with local leaders, mentors, faith groups that are doing, like this summer camp that was just talked about. That kind of a coding and working with drones, that sort of thing. Get kids in that camp with good influences, learning something, running around with other good kids, and send them home good and worn out. I think that's like I say, it's overly simplistic because basically that's just good parenting, but that's what it takes, is we got to keep them busy.
Absolutely. This next question, of course, is for Commissioner Stormy Gage Watts. You spoke to this earlier, what type of preventative measures are in place currently to keep juveniles out of detention?
That's a great question. Some of the very things that Director Walker just mentioned, some of those programs we're already funding through Caddo Parish Commission. The Juvenile Detention Center is able to fund several programs throughout the parish. there are so many wraparound services and so many people who have come forward since we have actually gone public with this challenge that they want to participate in it. I mean, we have the group homes that we talked about in the beginning. The L.L. Brandon House is one of the facilities. We have the Jewel House, RCC. There are so many that are out there
For those
that
that
are
don't,
benefited through Juvenile Detention Center. And some of these things are being done as preventative measures and not just as a holding place.
for those that don't know what RCC is, that might be sitting in the audience, what exactly is that?
That's Restoration Crisis Center,
Okay,
and that is a center for girls.
okay.
It's a beautiful facility, and it's a home for them. A lot of things that we deal with are human trafficking, and that is something that is a plague upon our nation. But here in Caddo Parish, believe it or not, we have some of the largest numbers right here. And some of those girls need a facility like that to go to be rehabilitated so that they can understand that you can come out of this. But you have to have those people in place to be able to help you do that.
Just so the audience can kind of get an understanding of how beneficial those wraparound services are.
Yes.
As relates to data, how successful have they been? And I know Mr. Walker can probably speak to this, as well as probably both the judges and yourself.
Absolutely. So, Director Walker, if you want to talk about the data
Sure.
and exactly the numbers, what they are.
So what we put in place, as Judge Young, as everyone's been saying, about 2 years ago, we recognized this was coming. We had several good meetings with our DA's office, and our new DA has done some wonderful work, paid a lot of really good attention to juvenile. He is implementing more diversion. So a child, first-time offense, they're young, small, like a misdemeanor, shoplifting at Walmart. Rather than prosecuting, rather than having them be arrested and brought to detention, that's a child that can be, the police can bring them home, they get a summons instead of going to detention, and then instead of being prosecuted, they get into a diversion program. Basically get into a mentoring program, get into a character building program, and if they're successful, the whole thing is dismissed and they have no record. That's one way to reduce the numbers coming to us and not have as many kids in detention. We've done things like the judges have implemented some shorter probation times, whereas we might have given a child, a year probation, you might be able to give a child 6 months or maybe 90 days, something shorter, get them into some good programs and then get them off probation. Those sorts of programs that we've been doing have reduced those numbers. Just since we started this in March, when we added some more of these programs, the numbers of children coming to detention have gone down by 47%. So we held in February of this year, our average daily population was 22, and last month it was 16.5, it was 17. So that may not seem like a lot, but you're talking about five fewer children a day were in detention because we are diverting more. The police are not bringing misdemeanors. The commission gave us some more money to increase the hours. We have what's called the Misdemeanor Referral Center.
Yeah, I was about to mention that.
So the Misdemeanor Referral Center, just like it sounds, a child gets arrested for a misdemeanor. Rather than coming to detention and spending time with a more serious violent offender, they go to the Misdemeanor Referral Center and they're picked up by their family that day. By increasing the hours there, we're reducing the numbers in detention. What we're trying to do is prepare as best we can. July 2020, the 17-year-olds that come, that's when you're adding the violent offenders. We won't have an option for summons or Misdemeanor Referral Center. We're talking about things like armed robbery, rape, and murder, unfortunately. So July 2020, those numbers will be coming to detention. We're going to do our best, given the budget we have, to have our detention numbers lower to try to absorb that. The concern I believe the judges are trying to pass along is that we may try all those efforts. What do you do if you have 25, 26 that are in on murder, rape, and armed robbery? So it's not a matter of saying we're trying to add more beds to lock more kids up. The 17-year-olds are coming and it's going to be violent offenses. If we only had 24, we'd be fine. If we have 26 that are in on armed robbery and murder, do we then do? I think the reality is we have a budget that we have now. As the commissioner said, we're already in a deficit. This was an unfunded mandate from the state, so we're working with what we can. But by July 2020, we either have to have some other plans or we have to add some space. Those are the concerns. And I think that, as Commissioner Gage Watts said, I think this is something that would be put to the people. They're going to have to vote on that to understand that and vote on that.
And let me add one thing too. You're also not dealing with just violent crimes. You have children who may not show up for court, and we have to issue what we call an order to take into custody or a bench warrant. Okay, and so sometimes those children they're always mostly held because we don't think they're going to come. They're a flight risk. Okay, Judge Young did state that there are some younger children who don't have the ability to run to Texas or California, but then again, there are some who do. Okay, and so once we catch up with them, we have to keep them because we can't trust them to leave again and come back to court. They're not. So we have to also keep those children in detention. And so some of those crimes that they've committed may not be as serious as some may think or violent. However, they may lead up to something else if we keep letting it go on. And so we have to sometimes hold them. So you have to also consider that we're not just holding children for violent offenses. We have to hold them for other reasons as well, even though it may be a short period of time.
Another thought on that.
Mr. Young?
Yeah, another thought on that, the outcomes, and that's very important. I've been doing a lot of thinking about that. A typical situation would be one of my drug court probationers isn't showing up for counseling sessions, is violating curfew, and is being disruptive at school. Now, if I have space in the smallest detention center in the South, then I can put him in detention for up to 7 days usually, and get his attention, make him focus on what's going on, make him realize that his liberty is at risk to the extent he continues to ignore the court orders of probation that prevent him from having to go off to juvenile prison. That's what probation is. It's an alternative to going off to a placement. And if that child continues to ignore those rules, I can put him in detention. If I have a full detention center and I'm looking at a weekend where I may be having some burglars, which is a nonviolent offense, by the way, but pretty serious, or armed robbers or such coming in, then I can't put that child in detention to get his attention, to make him follow probation conditions. What happens? He continues to run amok. And eventually he'll commit another offense, probably pretty quickly. And then I'll have no choice as a repeat offender, say a repeat burglar, or if he possesses a firearm, the law mandates that I revoke his probation and send him off to OJJ, Office of Juvenile Justice, for commitment. What favor have I done that child by keeping him out of detention while he was violating his conditions of probation? What favor has this community done to that child keeping him out of detention? I suggest to you no favor at all. We've helped ruin his life. Now, he was responsible for what he did, but we could have corrected it earlier if we had space in detention. Again, why Caddo Parish should have the smallest detention center in the South is beyond me. I wish somebody would explain why that is a good thing.
Commissioner Watts, did you want to?
Yes, I wanted to add to that. It was one of the things that I wanted to say earlier was that there's been a lot of holding also of state kids who should be in state in Swanson. You know, you mentioned OJJ, and they are not taking responsibility as well as this unfunded mandate. If you have kids who should be in prison, but they're being in a holding cell, which is a temporary place here at Juvenile Detention Center, that's not somewhere that's the prison, because that's not a prison, that's the detention center. So they should be in a prison. If they've done those crimes and they have been charged, then they need to be moved. But I know that we face challenges of the last moment, that last minute to come and get these kids and put them in that facility. So those are areas that need to be structured as well. I believe if I was to answer why it's the smallest detention center. I would say it's because it's been a great job up until this point, and you did not need expansion. And I believe in the mandate that has been passed down. 17-year-olds need to be tried as children. Some of them are not mature enough yet to be tried as adults. I do agree with that. However, the funding did not come with it. And I believe that if we want to ask a lot of questions, we should get the people to get involved and go to the state and ask them, how are you going to assist with this issue? Because this is something that we're all facing. And when we say it's the smallest, and we say about the other parishes that are dealing with it, there are also some parishes that are not dealing with it. Bossier Parish is not looking at this as an issue for them. Now, I can't answer why, because I don't represent Bossier Parish. There's also DeSoto Parish. They're not dealing with an issue. Is it because they're sending their children to Caddo? I mean, there's some answers out there, that we don't know the answers to. There's questions that we don't know the answers to. So I cannot say at the time that that detention center was built, it was built on the need. And now when we say expansion, if it comes to a point where we have to add 6 beds, I hope that I will have 8 votes and say, yes, we need to expand it by 6 beds. But I know that as of now, I can only speak on what we've gotten from the past. We don't have that to say, we have the money, let's build it, let's go into a deficit double of what we've already been spending.
Let me say one more thing, and we can end this because this will go on all night if we don't. I'm a huge supporter of Commissioner Gage Wise, as she is of mine, with different projects that we have going on. But I do want to say this, that as far as OJJ, or the Office of Juvenile Justice, is concerned, once a child is adjudicated or found guilty of a crime, they have 14 days to remove the child, meaning they have 14 days to find placement somewhere in the state of Louisiana, whether that be in Monroe or somewhere in South Louisiana, for the children to be placed, okay? And that's by law. We have to give them that time period, and we do. Very seldomly do they ask for an extension of time because they cannot place a child. Some children are just not placeable because they've caused so many problems, okay? And so we have to sometimes give them a little extension, but that's what we're required to do. So you have to also think we're mixing those kids with the children that we're having to hold because they're in probation violation, for the children that we're having to hold because they've been accused of committing a murder, attempted murder, a burglary, a rape. Think about all of that. And so that's what our concern is for next year. Yes, we've been doing a great job so far. However, if you look back, and I know especially since Judge Young has been on the bench over 20 years, that you didn't have these murderers and all of this going on with teenagers. I mean, in the fall of last year, we had, 4 or 5 come in at one time in Caddo Parish. And I'm like, I'm scared to go outside sometimes. Like, wait a minute, I'm the judge. Like, what is going on? Because we have to face reality. Yes, we are a smaller city in the South, but we're growing, and also people are coming in fast talking and committing more crimes and doing different things because of the age in which we live. It's not the same as it was when I was 16 years old, okay? I'm 40 years old, so that was 14 years ago? 24 years ago? 24, I'm not good with math, okay. 24 years ago. I was trying to be a little younger, okay. Trying to be a little younger. So 24 years ago, things have drastically changed. The climate has changed amongst our young people. It's not cool anymore just to, succeed in high school academically and through athletics and other means of just succeeding, going off to college and the military. It's cool to be on social media, which did not exist when I was a teenager, but be on social media holding a gun up. It's cool going to jail now. It's cool to be a girl twerking on social media. It's cool to sleep around as a girl, okay? It's cool to get paid for sex as a girl. Those are things that most of the children, the adults now who are my age, we didn't think about. That was the farthest thing from our minds. It's a different climate now. And you have to realize that. No, we're not saying, as I said earlier, if you build, they will come. They exist already in the adult system, and they'll be here July 2020 when the 17-year-olds with the violent offenses come over. We're just trying to be proactive with that. I don't want to say it's not going to happen, nothing's going to happen, and then when it does, or if it does, we're just trying to be proactive and letting you know. We don't want there to be an issue to the point where we can't hold these children. We can't mix them with CCC's population because they're children, can't mix them with adults, okay? I can't say that Bossier's bringing their children over here because there's an issue as far as jurisdiction, okay? And they can't just bring the child over to Caddo just because we don't have the space. They're coming to Caddo. They can't do that, okay? Now, some children who are already on probation in Caddo Parish, who've committed an offense in Bossier, those judges may say, since you're already on probation with Judge Young or Judge Casey Jones, we're going to transfer your disposition back over there. Now, that's something completely different because they're already on probation with us. But most of the time, with those type of children, they're already in the state's custody, okay? So it's different circumstances. So it's not as though, I just want to make sure the public is well informed of everything, not only from the commissioner's viewpoint, but also from the court's viewpoint.
Absolutely.
And I just want to add that I know that one thing that you said that I want to make sure that you said that you're not saying to build a jail and then they will come, but that has been said. That has been said.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But
What
it
Casey
has,
Jones is saying.
yes, but it definitely has been said, and that is one thing that I would not promote. That is one thing that I would not promote, definitely not. And I do understand that we are operating under different auspices. Things have changed drastically. I'm 43 years old, and so I know that a lot of things that children are into now that they were not into 25 years ago as a teenager. But I do know that children are still children. I do believe that God is not sending new people here. I do believe that he's the same God of yesterday, today, and forevermore. And so with that being said, I do believe that as a mother of 3 boys, that I will do everything that I can to continue to work towards a better justice system. Today, before I came here, I visited my uncle, who was probably going to expire very soon. But he left here because of a bad justice system, of something that happened to him when he was a teenager. And I told him he couldn't really understand probably what I was saying today, but I told him that I would talk about it tonight. He stayed away from Shreveport because he was afraid of the justice system. For 35 years, he would not come back to Shreveport. And now he's in a state that this is the only place that he could come back to because this is where his family is. Not saying that that's every case, but when we look at the reality of it, it's our children who are in these prisons. And I know that our children are not the only ones who are committing crimes. But what is it? What is the answer to those type of questions? So that's what I'm saying.
And before we move any further, I certainly want to thank our sponsors, because it's in forums like this that we can educate the public, that we can let everyone know exactly what's going on, and especially from those that work in those arenas day in and day out. So of course we want to thank, of course, the Reynolds Foundation for their sponsorship, for hosting, for sponsoring this event on tonight. Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, we also want to thank them as well. The L.L. Brandon III Transitional Home for Boys, we want to thank that organization. And also Praise Temple, of course, we want to thank them, and the Northwest Louisiana Community Development Corporation for their efforts as well. And again, it's because of organizations like these that are sponsors that we are able to host events like this and allow the public to be well educated and well informed. At this time, we are going to open it to the public, well, to the audience, and I know many of you may have a few questions, so we have some persons that are going to help with the microphones. If you have a question, of course, just raise your hand and they will come to you most expeditiously.
They come with the mics. If you would ask the question, don't give a whole lot of commentary. Whatever question you have, just ask the question, and then our panelists will have it. But I do also, from the standpoint, I'm grateful for the alternative programs. And I hear you, judges, and I really appreciate you, Mr. Walker, and what have you, as it relates to the needs that are coming. But I really stand for prevention and not detention, as you do. And we don't need to build, in my opinion, we don't need to build more prisons, but we should have alternative programs and alternative nonprofits with alternative programs to help us. Because again, with the Brandon House, as we've already discussed, we can retrofit 2 wings and increase the bed population as a step down where it's secured, but again, the nonviolent offenders can come there because, of course, those who murder, they should be locked up.
Absolutely.
And no, I'm cut and dry about that.
Yes.
And so if they are murdering, locking up, and even burglary, there's some serious burglaries out there, they should be locked up because we want to protect our citizens. But then also, as an African-American male, we know that the system is not fair in the United States of America. My son lives in Orlando, Florida, a graduate of a university there, and I'm prayerful and I believe God, but then every now and then when the phone rings, I'm a little shaken, wondering if he's okay or is he calling because he's a big boy. He doesn't look as good as I do, but he's a big boy, and he can be intimidating, but that police officer doesn't know that. And so, unfortunately, there's a different, there people have racial profiling, let's just say it that way. And it's unfortunate it happens in our nation. And of course, you have some horrible police officers out there, just like you have some horrible preachers out there. You know, it's so unfortunate. However, we do know the system is not totally fair. And so if we build in more beds, I have a chaplain friend, I'm in a doctoral program at ORU, a chaplain friend of mine said, and he's African-American, he said, I won't call the area that he's from, but he said that his warden told them that if they don't raise the census in his particular prison, they're going to have to lay some people off. So in order to remain employed, what do? They fill the beds. And so, again, we have alternative programs, and I hope we can come to an agreement with it. And I know it's not the judge's decision, but the commission and what have you, but some alternative programs, because, again, we don't want our children to repeat offense as some of our children are doing. And of course, the judges have a hard job, and I'm grateful. Let's give it up for these 2 judges. I'm grateful for their service and their work, and had breakfast with them, and they're very, very fair. We thank God. But if we had judges like them throughout Louisiana, we wouldn't really have all of these problems. But again, let's look for alternative programs, because we're better together. We're one race, and that's the human race. And so let us work together to make sure our children have a fair chance here in the state of Louisiana.
Okay. Our first question.
Yes, I hear you guys talk about that there are a lot of programs for the kids after they come into detention. I was just wondering, are there any programs, preventative programs, while they're in school?
Who do you want to answer that question?
Anyone.
Mr. Walker?
Yes, there are. We have, and I've actually got right here a list. We have 151 programs that we work with in Caddo Parish. They are not limited to kids that have gotten into trouble. A lot of this can be preventative. We are actually working with the school system right now, just as an example. There's a pilot project at J.S. Clark to try to bring programs to the kids there, because transportation can be hard for the parents. We try to bring programs to the school. We're looking right now, another program, this is limited to children in foster care, but we're looking to bring some funding for kids that are in foster care to be able to go to programs, families that could afford it. We're trying to provide that as an opportunity for kids in foster care. I'd like to say it's something that we could expand with the commission's help, but again, this is a money problem. I mean, we're limited money-wise. The more, it's what I said about how kids can stay out of trouble in the summer. If I could figure out a way to get every child in Caddo Parish, tell me what you want to do this summer. If I could help them get into that program, I would love to do it, because I'd have fewer kids, getting in trouble. But it's a money problem trying to get that. But there are definitely a lot of programs, and a lot of these programs don't cost. Some do minimal cost, but a lot of them don't cost too much. There are definitely programs.
Is there a site or something that a parent can go to find a list of these programs?
We can make it available on caddo.org. We'll get Anita to add it to that, so
Yes.
that the parents will know and their guardians will know that there are programs out there that are already in place. And I love the fact that detention centers may be a place that you want to take your child to, so that they can see this is a place that they don't want to go to. You know, let them see those white shoes that they wear. No more Jordans. You know, none of those name brand things. And let them see the orange suits.
Don't let them taste the food, though, because it is very
They wanna
good.
say-
It is, and we
Yeah.
like to have lunch over there because the state has them very spoiled on what kind of foods that they have to eat. But I think that is a great thing that you're asking about those programs in a way that we can provide those. And we also have a summer work program for those who are at least 16 years old that is being provided by Caddo Parish Commission as well. And you have to see a commissioner. Time is winding up because we're about to put them to work, and you'll probably have some kids over there working at Juvenile Detention Center. Yes, it's always a money issue, and yes, I always go and ask for whatever the Juvenile Detention Center asks me for. I have some commissioners saying, how much more are you gonna ask for? I mean, Commissioner, when is it gonna cut off? But we wanna do whatever we can to help make this work. We wanna work together.
Good evening. I'm gonna do exactly what Bishop said not to do, is make a quick statement. I'm just playing. But I do wanna ask Clay, because I don't think what I heard was about the process for which come July 2020 or June 2020, if we do have a 17-year-old that commits a crime, there is a process in place so that they can stay at CCC and not have to come over to Juvenile Detention Center. And then the other thing that I want to talk about, or just mention, Judge Young, more often than not, I think the last millage renewal we went up for juvenile was 2017? 16?
Yes,
That was shot down
yes.
in the northern part of the parish, killed that renewal. And so the city of Shreveport, or the inner city, typically renews its millages. It's the folks north and south of the parish that are killing these renewals. And so it's not the people in here that you have to convince, even though we're the ones filling them up, that you have to convince to renew these millages. And as a commissioner, I can say I will not be for building a new jail, not when we have identified a solution with the LL Brandon home. It's just that the state will not help us enact that solution. So it is not like we have not come to a solution. We need to put political pressure on our state leaders to identify and help us get to that solution. But Clay, if you will, go over that process
Yes.
so that they don't have to come to juvenile.
Absolutely, and this is something certainly the judges can speak to as well, but I think what you're referring to, if a child, the truly terrible crimes, murder, rape, and armed robbery, generally get transferred to adult. So in Louisiana, depending on the age, but say, for example, even at 16, if you commit a murder, you can be transferred to the adult system. It's still a process that takes several weeks. The child would be arrested, brought to juvenile detention. The DA chooses to then prosecute the child as an adult, and after a period of time, they can be transferred. That's what we're talking about. Our concern is going to be, even with that transfer of those kids, will 24 beds be enough? That's going to be the question. And I hear you in terms of the alternatives with the Bishop Brandon home and other options like that. What it does boil down to, I think your reference is correct. I believe it's been 5 times. The commission has gone to the voters of Caddo Parish 5 times to increase the 1957 millage, to update it. And all 5 times it's been rejected. The issue, though, I think that is now before us, those 5 times that it was rejected, we didn't have 17-year-olds.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this over the 2 years I've been wrestling with this issue and speaking about it. there's never been a particular, I'll say it again, crisis issue such as the significant overcrowding is not the right word, busting at the seams of the detention center. In fact, let me correct that. The detention center will not be overcrowded. The state law and the guidelines for detention centers caps it at 24. This judge will not break the law and put 27 or 28 kids in detention. I won't do it. Nobody can make me do it. I'm not going to break the law, and I'm not going to put kids that are supposed to be in a juvenile detention center in some kind of makeshift city jail that somebody plasters a sign on the outside calling it a juvenile detention center. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to break the law. So we're not going to have an overcrowded juvenile detention center. We are going to have kids released to the streets that don't need to be released to the streets. And you're going to have increased crime, increased recidivism, and ruined lives, as I described earlier with the example of the drug court kid that should have been put in detention that was on probation. You're going to have ruined lives as a result of people not paying attention to the fact that we already release every kid from detention that we can safely. So less restrictive settings is not the answer, with all due respect, based on my 20 years experience. We have to have a detention center that fits the size of the city that we are. It's as simple as that, folks. And I'm hoping that the Caddo Parish voters will realize in this election that might be coming up, I hope it will, that there is that emergency and that it is a good reason to support that effort. And if they don't, we'll do the best we can, but it will involve releasing a lot of kids that should not be released.
Thank you, Judge Young.
All right.
Next question.
I want to share about who I am a little bit before I ask my question. I've been in Shreveport since August. I was in Florida before in my doctoral program in school psychology, and I worked in inpatient units as well as counseling centers. And the few kids of color that I worked with, their mother was a nurse or in the health profession, and that's how they knew about the services that I could provide. And I'm seeing a similar issue here in terms of with the lady who asked the question about what services can be provided. School-based mental health programs is one, and then I work at LSU West in this school psychology department, and I'm going to be the clinic director when I'm licensed in 2 months. And we have the School of Rock, which is a program for reading, intense program for elementary age students that will be held this summer. My question to the two on the left is what type of mental health services are being provided in the center? How many psychologists or counselors are on staff? Are there partnerships with LSUS and the counseling graduate department and the school psychology graduate department? And if not, we would love to offer our services to help.
We do have that relationship already established. We have a full-time mental health counselor. We have a contract counselor for when that person is unavailable. We have a full-time nurse in the detention center. In our different programs in the juvenile drug court, in the family preservation court, we use contract counselors in the community. We have programs with, I want to say, I know LSUS and Southern, where we have interns coming in and doing some work, so that's a constant ongoing.
Mental health court.
We have the mental health court where kids are identified that have particularly serious mental health problems. But then there's basically the wraparound services, and I'm sure it's similar in Florida, but our Medicaid system is now what's called a wraparound service, and this is also in the school system. They have access to this too. So identifying a child that has some kind of mental health need, they can make a referral to, we have a local wraparound agency called Loisianna Choices. They do an assessment for what those needs are, and then a referral is made to, there are dozens, and that's part of this list of the programs, dozens, I mean maybe even over 100 mental health agencies in town that can take families and children that need Medicaid. So we do have a lot of those connections. We've actually just, as an aside, we've done several programs with that community to say, what training do you need? And you may get this, There are evidence-based programs like trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. To be trained in that is tens of thousands of dollars. So what we did was we got a grant for $70,000 and we trained 30 local practitioners in TFCBT if they'll agree to take our referrals. So we've done that with several different evidence-based programs. We're trying to bring the best training to Caddo, train our community here at a reduced cost, and then we refer kids to those programs.
That's
So
another area where we're the best in the state, by far.
the folks-
Leader in the state.
I've got my counterparts in Lake Charles and Jefferson Parish are doing a fantastic job. I mean, just to be clear, in case they're watching wherever Bishop Brand's talking about.
Not near as good.
I think they're doing a great job. But that's one of the ways that we prevent it. I mean, the bottom line is it's best if it happens in school. When a child is 7, 8, 9, if they're beginning to demonstrate some problems, if they're having some problems, I'd rather have the school system make that referral for mental health issues than ever coming to us. To do that when they're younger. And we do have a lot of very good services in the community to make those connections and make those referrals. And hopefully that's one of the ways we can reduce the detention population, prevent it that way.
In the future.
Our next question.
Good afternoon. Piggyback on what this gentleman said. Judge Casey, have there ever become a time where you have a kid, you have a young adult, 17, that is actually is a mental patient, okay? And do you still feel as though they should be in a detention center rather than in a hospital? Have you ever came across that, or what kind of decision will you make? Because I have seen a lot of kids that has problems, that has mental problems, Judge Young, and that don't need detention center, that really need help. Now, I do know, being African American, we are proud. We are proud. But me, it's always been a mother. Those are kids out there that really need help. And especially, Judge Young, they continuously do the same thing. Have you ever got down, or have you guys ever got down to the nitty-gritty of it and try to find alternative measure to help these people or help these young adults rather than to go to the detention center or?
Of course, all the time. We have to appoint sanity commissions and competency commissions all the time. If there is an issue when the children come to court, and they've been working with different programs in the city, they may have a counselor or therapist or something, they'll come to court on behalf of that child. We're not just putting them in detention just to say this is what we want to do. A lot of the children that we serve are first-time offenders, okay? So when they first come in, they can be 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. We don't know they have a mental condition because they look just like anybody else, okay? They come in, they're able to communicate with their lawyer. It's not until the lawyer tells us something is an issue, or like I said, a therapist or a counselor comes in and says, hey, this child has a problem and we need to look into something else, okay? So those children, most of the time, are not in detention, and if they are and we see that there's a problem, we seek help for those children. There are also places, and I'm gonna let Judge Young say something too, but there are also places throughout the state, hospitals and programs that service these type of children that have these mental issues. So even if they are adjudicated FNCS, for instance, Family Needed Services, then we can send them off to these different places, okay, for placement. And that helps them. It's not just some place where it locks them up. Some children have some serious mental issues, and that's the reason why they've committed these offenses. And so we do try, and like I always say, we try to rehabilitate, okay? It's not to lock them up and throw away the key. Sometimes it's necessary because they've hurt somebody in their family. I can't send them back home for that. So I have to find somewhere safe for them, okay? And that someplace where also they're going to get the help that they need to stop any future offenses.
Yeah, I was a mental health advocate for 10 years, my first 10 years out of law school. So I'm sensitive to the mental health issue. That's why I started the first mental health court for juveniles in the state back in 2006. And as I said earlier, my staff have been able to cut the commitment rate, the out-of-home placement rate, from 66% down to about 10 to 15%. I mean, that's saving a lot of kids' lives. And my staff do a great job. We have a mental health coordinator and a couple of specialized probation officers that have mental health backgrounds. And so I'm just really proud of that program for our court. The key is that in this state, our mental health services are really very poor. We don't have options for temporary placements. There's no beds of any significance for adolescents that are state supported. You have to go down to Mandeville to find any. And I'm not sending a kid down to Mandeville that's 12 years old if I can help it, because that's going to disrupt him from his family life, and family can't visit, and usually it's a family problem. So anyway, I think we've done pretty well in that area to the extent the court can act, but we don't, remember, judges don't go out in the community and start beating the streets for kids that need help. That's not what we do. We receive cases from the police that have arrested kids for allegedly committing crimes, and we determine what in fact happened and what to do about it. So our prevention role as judges is kind of deferred to others, frankly, like Mr. Walker and others. And we rely on that in the community. You know, the parents and community people are the real people that solve most of the juvenile problems in our state. Absolutely. No question about it. But we still have a full detention center, and we've got 17-year-olds coming, and nothing's going to stop that.
We're going to have two more questions, one of which is in the audience. The other I'm going to read from an online viewer. So at this time, Elder Marshawn.
Good evening. My first question is to Judge Young, and anyone else can answer. Why do you think there are such drastic racial disparities in youth incarceration as researched and studied by the Youth Center in New Orleans? And that study was referenced to all of the state of Louisiana.
It is a horrible, horrible problem. At least, I don't think I'm overstating, 95% of our detention population are young black males. I'll throw in a few females. The disparity is real. It is chronic. I, of course, like to say that I don't contribute to that disparity as far as placement goes or findings of guilt or innocence. That's easy for me to say, of course. I don't think I've ever had a study done on my decision making, and that's what would be necessary. I tend to think that the disparity is caused before it gets to me. Of course, everybody in the system probably says that. The DA would say that. The police officer on the street would say that. And there's some truth to all of it. Because, of course, where does most of the problems with our young people start? In the home. And the homes, as we know right now, are not the way they were 24 years ago, certainly not the way they were when I was a younger person, double that, 48 years ago. Boy, that's hard to say. They're not the same as they were then, but of course, there were problems then too with disparity. So it is a problem that no one has developed a solution for. The only solution, I've gone to seminars just on that issue because I care a lot about it. And the only solution I came away with was, and people actually said this on the program, well, you have to lock up more white kids, and that will change the disparity. That's not the solution, is it? so I don't know.
And I guess I would say it's still children, Judge, and I would say that I believe that you are a very fair judge. And I can also say that you can only work with what is being delivered unto you. So I could ask the community, what is it that we're doing different that other communities are not doing? Why are those children not being presented through the system? Is it because they already know about all of these preventative programs that are in place? Is it because we're the last ones to know about these type of programs? Or is it because we don't have our children involved enough? So there's some questions that we will have to ask ourselves. Why are African American children being introduced to the juvenile detention center more than any other race?
I think, let me say something on that too, as far as racial disparity. I think that you're preaching to the choir when you speak to these two judges and some other judges in the parish. You're not going to find many judges who are out in the community speaking on issues, okay? They're going to stay behind that bench in that black robe, and that's as far as you're going to get to them, okay? We're actually out in the community doing different things and trying to reach the public. But it goes back to home, okay? In the African American community, unfortunately, they don't have the resources that they do in the white communities. It's not saying that it's not happening in the white communities, it's just they know how to hide it, okay? And they're not calling the cops on their kids. The neighbors aren't calling the cops, they're dealing with that at home. Whereas we're working 2-3 jobs trying to make ends meet, okay? It's a reality. I am a mother of a young black male, and every time I see a little boy come in my courtroom that's a black male, I think about my baby. That could be him. He's only 8, but I don't know what will happen in the future. So every decision that I make, I'm making that as if they were my Dawson, okay? No, they're not my child, but I want somebody to be able to have the same compassion for my child because I don't know where he's gonna be one day. And so that's what we have to think about, and that's what I mean about we have to be realistic with everything. It's not my goal to just lock up black children, but 95% of the children that I see in my courtroom are African American. I can't stop it. I can't. I don't have the power to say, well, you know what? I'm just going to dismiss everybody's case, and you know what? I wouldn't have a job. I can't do that. I cannot do that. I have to hear the allegations. I have to hear what they have to say, what they're being accused of, and I have to be able to determine whether or not I feel that this child did something wrong, okay? And sometimes, as I tell people, it's necessary. It's necessary for detention. It's necessary. Not all the time, but it is necessary. But I think that this group here and the people in Caddo Parish are working, they are doing everything they possibly can to deter these children, to prevent these children from committing additional crimes or committing crimes at all.
And I think we do weed out some biased arrests that do take place. We hear the evidence. We find kids not guilty. Routinely is a bad word to use in any circumstance, but frequently. And so that's one way judges can correct a biased system, is to be fair in its fact-finding, fair in its decision-making, fair in its sentencing. Look aggressively for alternative placements such as aunts, uncles, grandparents, that you have to really use, here's the word, affirmative action to accomplish. You know, it's easy to say, okay, one parent's in prison and the other parent is on drugs and they're with a grandparent, the grandparent's too tired. Well, they get committed. No, you look for aunts and uncles, siblings. You look for anybody that cares about this child, and that's what you try. That's affirmative action to try to correct the disparity, at least at that late stage in the system.
If I can add just one thing to it, I know you're trying to get to the time, but to answer your question as best I can, I follow the data on this every day. These judges take in about between 87 and 88% of the children that walk in juvenile detention are African American. And it's been that way for 10 years that I've been looking at it.
I have done a little bit of a study on this. They decide when a child walks in who leaves and who stays. They maintain exactly about 87, 88% of the kids that stay are African American. So to the extent that the decisions that are made appear to be race neutral, the same percentage that's coming in is the percentage that's being held. It does come down to, in my opinion, to what Judge Casey Jones was talking about. There was actually a study done in 1972. You can Google it. It's called The Saints and the Roughnecks. And it literally says, it's called The Saints and the Roughnecks. It literally says it followed about 12 black kids and 12 white kids. What are they doing on a Friday night and a Saturday night? They're doing the exact same thing. The white kids were doing it behind a gated community, and the black kids were doing it on the street corner. And it's where and how the police got called in and what the police were seeing, and the black kids were getting arrested for the same thing the white kids were doing. The white kids just weren't being exposed to the police. And the shame of it was they followed them for a couple decades, and the majority of the white kids matured out of that foolishness, and the black kids got caught up in the system and exposed to bad things in the system, and it actually caused some more trouble for them. So a lot of this has to do with, as Judge Casey Jones was saying, and I think that Bishop Branding is alluding to, what do we do as a community to get more programs out there for kids so that they can be doing positive things and not hanging out on the street corner? I think the judge is already saying that when they do get called in by the police, how do we divert them away from the system, get them into good programs, get them into positive things, and only be locking up, unfortunately, when we're talking about things like murder and armed robbery. Those are the efforts we're trying. And I would welcome, I've already welcomed many times Bishop and Wanda Brandon to come and tour and see what we do. Our doors are open for the community, groups, community leaders, come and see what we do and put your own eyes on it to observe it. We take suggestions to make things better, but I do try to track that every single day to make sure we're doing the best we can for that. And I just think it's a very deep community problem about where police get called in and where kids are doing what they're doing.
And as a caveat, I just think that Judge Young said something that really drew my attention about not having a temporary placement for mental health young adults. Did I hear you correctly? Mm-hmm. And I know that you have a program, Facts of Life. And because you've identified that there's a need there, I think it would be advantageous for us to reach out to those state leaders as well. Because I know there's been several agencies that has come before Caddo Parish Commission trying to open an establishment that will help youth mental health patients. And without us having that facility, I think we should be asking that question why, because that would be a very important puzzle, a piece to our puzzle that we're working here to make sure that we're getting those citizens the right help that they need. And if we can't provide those services because we just don't have a place for them, then we need to find out why.
This last question is from an online viewer, and I asked, I'm going to direct this to Judge Casey as well as Judge Young, and if you would, just possibly answer it in about 1 minute apiece. The question was, are parents or guardians held accountable for the unlawful conduct of their children when they are brought before the juvenile court system?
Yes. Yes. I think I had one of the first cases on that, but last year before last, where a mother was prosecuted because her child was a habitual offender. Okay. I will be honest with saying I did not agree with that particular parent being prosecuted. And the reason was because that parent was working when her child committed those offenses, okay? And she worked because she's a single mother of multiple children. And what else is she supposed to do? She has teenagers, and so she leaves them at home. They wander off. She doesn't know what they're doing. She's working. She's not at the club. She's not with a man somewhere getting high. She's working, trying to make ends meet. So that particular situation I didn't agree with. but I had a job to do, and we have discretion as far as what we do. And I believe with that situation, I think I may have just fined her something and, gave her several months to pay that or something. But for the other parents who just don't care or act like they don't care, those parents should be held accountable, okay?
Yeah. The DA decides whether to actually file
He
a
does.
prosecution
He does.
for parental gross neglect or actually assisting a child in participating in the crime. Where the judges can really make an impact is, say I adjudicate a child for a burglary and I put him on probation and he's supposed to attend this program and this program, and parents supposed to make sure they get there, parents supposed to cooperate with the probation officer, open up the home to the probation officer. The probation officer can see what's going on in the home, and the parent doesn't cooperate. I hold them in contempt of court, 6 months in jail, up to 6 months. To get that parent's attention, usually it just takes about a week, and it gets their attention. So that's how a judge can, quote, punish a parent for the acts of their kids when they won't cooperate with the conditions of probation and trying to improve the child's situation. They don't care, then I'll hold them accountable. Vast majority of parents do care. Just like the vast majority of kids are good kids. Even the ones that mess up, they're good kids. We're not trying to ship them away or punish them. We're trying to rehabilitate, trying to change them, trying to keep them out of the adult system is what we're trying to do. We need a detention center to do that has room for the kids that we need to use it for.
Again, thank you guys so much for coming and sharing with us on tonight. Audience, if we could just give them a round of applause for their time and their dedication to be here on tonight and to inform us of what's happening with this juvenile justice issue. At this time, I would like that you guys provide us with closing remarks. Mr. Walker, we'll begin with you.
All I can say is that I appreciate this kind of conversation. I do think that the real solution to this is in the community and in the homes. I think that the more that the juvenile justice system can work with the school system, the better. I think we need to have more early childhood education, more Head Start, more pre-K. We need to help families 0 to 5, because if we can, the more we have better education, we'll lower our numbers. I mean, I think unfortunately we're always going to have a certain number of children coming to us, but I think education is the real long-term solution. I do want to just point out, as Judge Young said, there are 64,000 children in Caddo Parish. 433 came to detention last year, and only about 120 are serious repeat offenders. So in terms of the percentages, 64,000 children, and we're dealing with about 120 serious repeat offenders.
It's a bunch of good kids.
There's a lot of really good kids. And so I think the more we can work with the school system to prevent it, the more we can work with the faith community to prevent it, the more we can provide resources for families to prevent it. That's what I'm all about.
Yes, I have to agree with a lot of those things that you said, but I want to say thank you to Bishop Brandon, to Co-Pastor Brandon, and for all of the organizers of this event. You know, when I look at Code Red, and it means it's a fire. And when you think about it, I think about our children being in a fire, and it's up to us to save them from that fire. I believe that collectively, as it has been stated amongst us on this evening, that we can make a difference, but we have to work together. It's not just the commission's responsibility or any elected official or the state level or a pastor or these judges. We all have to take our own accountability and be responsible for the children, even the children who don't belong to us. You know, we have to be bold enough to stand up to those children. They are children. They have been entrusted to us. It's time for us to do more than just talk about it and sit around with forms. It's time for us to actually do something about it. We need to fight for those centers to come back, like the YMCA inside of our inner city. We sit back and we allowed a lot of things that were taken out of our communities to happen without saying anything. You gave no alternative to our children. They have to get outside. It's great to have games. I have 3 game fanatics at my house, but they're gonna see the sun. So there's so many things that we can do together to make a difference throughout this community and keep our children out this fire. You are needed, you are wanted, and I am willing to work with whomever wants to make a difference. Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity for this forum and to explain what's going on in our juvenile justice system and, frankly, the crisis that is coming it's already here, frankly, with our 17-year-olds committing nonviolent offenses, burglaries, for example, and the ones that are coming to our system. Nothing's going to change the fact that next year we'll have more kids than we can handle at detention. Nothing will change that. It can improve over time, over a decade. If you start at early education, it can improve, but nothing's going to change that in the near future. So I just really think Caddo Parish citizens deserve a juvenile justice system, including a detention center that's appropriate for its size and its characteristics. The children are worth it. I use detention to save children. It's as simple as that. To save them from themselves sometimes, to save them from the adult system. And I need that help. And I'm confident the Caddo Parish voters would see that and approve it. And I hope we can get it before them, because the 17-year-olds are coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Bishop and co-pastor, this evening. It has been a joy to be here. It's always a joy to basically be able to speak to the community and let you all know what we do and answer any questions that you have. I speak often on parents becoming parents, and there's not a guideline or a manual when we become parents. We don't know how to do it. It's all about trial and error. And it does take a village. It does. And I think a lot of it comes from us teaching parents how to be parents, because they don't know. They don't know. Some of us were very fortunate to have good parents who raised us and nurtured us and were there for us. It doesn't happen like that all the time. And we live in a different age, as I said earlier. And you often have to take yourself out of your situation and step into somebody else's shoes. Okay? I don't know what it's like not to have both parents in the home. Okay? But I deal with children every day who majority of them only have one parent in the home, if parents are at home at all. And so I have to step out of how I was raised and what I know and put myself in those children's shoes, and that's where the compassion comes in. And I make decisions based on that. And so as a community, we have to do what's best for our children, because they are our future. I mean, people say, oh, that's so corny, but it's the truth. They are, okay? It's a cycle. It just goes around. The circle of life, it goes around. And so we have to be able to invest in our children, whether they are ours, they're our neighbors, they're our nieces, our nephews, whomever they may be, our godchildren. We have to be able to invest in children and care about them and say, those bad children, although there are only a few in Caddo Parish, that's not my problem. It's everybody's problem. And we all have to work together to come up with a solution that's best for our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And let's give it up for our moderator, KT, we call her on the radio. And of course, my brothers at the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, would you please stand? Let's give it up for the Alphas that is here tonight. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And of course, Brother Ted Cox here. He's administrator. Let's give it up for Brother Ted. Been knowing him for some time. This has been wonderful. Let's give it up one more time for our panelists. Thank you for sacrificing your time. to be here tonight. Before I pray, I do want to say this. I know Judge Young mentioned that he would never send any kids to, a makeshift, and I'm grateful for that comment, because I'm sure the commissioners are intelligent enough not to allow that to happen. Someone to throw up a sign and send them there, or the state of Louisiana. But if it was so, I would rather a makeshift center than a beautiful brand new cage for our children. And I will never support at all if I have to stand on every street corner. If it passes, it passes, but I'm gonna do my part to shut it down, because we don't need, and of course we can agree to disagree, and that's okay, because we're intelligent, civilized people. But I will never stand for it, because there are alternatives and prevention and detention, and we can help our children. If we're serious about our children, there's some things we can do with them when they are born, from the cradle, amen, and help them out to the grave. So thank you much. Would you stand, please? I appreciate you. You're just some awesome people. Give yourselves a big hand. And Dr. Mary Jackson is here, the Black Lawyers Association. Would you share who's here?
We have Attorney Smith, Attorney Sear, and if there's any others that I don't see, I know they said they will be here, but I just want to thank each of them for sacrificing their time to come out. Amen. Enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you so much. And everyone, you can get additional information on the Brandon House, and the Brandon House is an awesome place, and I guarantee you we got some great professionals, and we have some professionalism in our community, and we are better together. Let's look to the Lord. Father, in the name of Jesus, we